Hey guys, welcome back to Snake Limited. I'm John, and today I want to start a two-part series about buying and selling on MorphMarket and how to protect yourself when doing so. In today's video, I'm going to start off with how to protect yourself as a seller. And this is really going to be based around setting up your store policy in MorphMarket. This video and on the buying video, I'll post the necessary links to the images that I'm posting up here during the video, to store policies, the buying guidelines, and all those sorts of things from MorphMarket directly. I'll put those in the description. But today I want to talk about a seller and how to protect yourself. So by default, when you set up a store on MorphMarket, there's a default store policy that MorphMarket applies to every single seller on MorphMarket. This is set up to protect both you as the seller and the buyer as well. And it outlines things like, IDing genetics, shipping, live arrival guarantees, size and health of the snake, when and if refunds should be given, all those sorts of things. I'll post a screenshot here of it, but I'll also put the link in the description below. As regarding your store policies, I highly recommend that you customize it to how you see fit. In my personal opinion, the way MorphMarket has it set up is it's probably a 50-50 split as to who it favors, the buyer and the seller. However, I think the terminology really in the default policy maybe even gives a little too much leniency to the buyer and what their course of action is if they have a complaint. For instance, my issue as a seller, and maybe something that I've changed in my default and into my store policy, is if you have any complaints when you receive the snake regarding health, you need to make those known immediately. Because if somebody purchases a snake from me and they get it into their collection and they have it there for a week or 2 or 3 weeks or a month, and then they're going to complain about the snake having a respiratory infection, that respiratory infection most likely probably happened at the buyer's residence. A respiratory infection showing up, 4 weeks after the fact, is probably unlikely. It's not impossible, but probably unlikely. The problem is, once the buyer has had this snake for an extensive amount of time, even a week, there's no way of knowing where these issues are popping up. If there's any health concerns and they're popping up that far after receiving the snake, I don't know if they came from me, and I don't know if they came from you. And there's no way for either of us to prove that. So any health concerns, the way that I changed the store policy to what I feel is appropriate for me is you have a certain amount of time to let me know if there's any issues with the health of the snake. Now that was just an example of how I changed MorphMarket's default policy for something regarding just the overall health of the snake. You might be thinking to yourself, well, where do I start? I don't know what to do. How do I change this default policy so it benefits, that it's fair to both sides, but it also protects me as a seller? Very easy way to start. Go to somebody else's store policy and copy it. I actually took bits and pieces of mine. I know I took some from Canova when I set this up. Back then it was JKR still. I took some of my verbiage from Aussie. Then I'm sure I took it from some other more well-known breeders as well. And then I also changed some of the text, some of the policy to better fit what I felt worked for me as a seller. And that's where to start. If you feel like you want to go read my store policy, and I'll post a link for that as well, and you want to copy that verbatim, it doesn't matter to me. It's not like we're in school and you're worried about copyright laws or anything. Copy it and edit it as you want. Copy it verbatim, post it in your store policy. that's fine as well. But don't feel overwhelmed that this is going to be something that's too difficult for you to do. Just copy somebody else's work, edit it as you see fit, and then make sure you post it. Because if you do not post a store policy, you will have to kind of live and die by the sword that MorphMarket has set as the default policy, and that might be okay with you. But I would assume that most breeders choose to customize these to best fit, what they feel protects them the best as a seller. Now, this store policy is the contract or the agreement between you and between your buyer. It needs to really outline everything that you feel is going to protect you in case that there is an argument or discrepancy between what you and the buyer are saying. So make sure that your policy is watertight and you're not missing anything. For me, I state in there that I do not ship to home. I only ship to FedEx Hub. That's not a big discrepancy, but people need to know that before they purchase a snake from me. It's usually not completely safe to ship to homes because your snakes are sitting on the FedEx truck. Some FedEx trucks get delivered first thing in the morning, some do not. But especially during the winter time or the blazing heat of the summer, it's not really safe for the snakes to be sitting on those trucks for long hours. It's a lot safer for those snakes to be in the FedEx Hub where it's temperature controlled, there's no high highs, there's no low lows. So that's not stated anywhere in MorphMarket's default policy, but I make that explicitly clear that I only ship to the FedEx Hub, so that if somebody's buying from me, and they should be reading store policies, if you're buying a snake, you should be reading everybody's store policy that you're buying from. You should not be surprised if you're buying from me and it says, and I go to email you after you pay, all right, which hub do you want to get it shipped to? And you're like, well, I want to ship to my home. Well, I don't ship to your home. I only ship to your hub. That way, that snake has the best chance of arriving healthy, and it kind of minimizes the possibility that you and I are going to have some sort of a discrepancy in what's going on with the health of the snake. So that protects me, but it also protects you. And first and foremost, it protects the snake's health. When a customer purchases an animal from you, a snake or ball python in this instance, they're agreeing to your store policy. If you don't have a customized one, they're agreeing to the default one that is set by MorphMarket. But that's why I highly recommend customizing yours, so that they're agreeing to your terms, not the ones that were just made by default. At that point, you're kind of in a binding agreement. These are the rules that you set forth, and the buyer is agreeing to those rules. Those rules should also hold you accountable as well, for making sure that you're advertising the snake properly, making sure that the snake is healthy, making sure that you're shipping to the customer in a timely manner on a day that it's safe to ship, and whatever else you decide to outline in that store policy. When the buyer is making your purchase, and for instance, I use Square as my payment processing company, I have a link in the invoice that I email to a customer that says, this is my store policy, please read it before making your payment. If they choose not to read that, that's their problem. It's not yours. You have it in the invoice. MorphMarket actually makes it explicit that, look, you buy a snake from this person, you're either agreeing to the MorphMarket default policy or you're agreeing to the seller's store policy. If you choose not to read that, if you choose to disregard some of that, that's your fault as the buyer. That doesn't fall back on the seller. So when they make that purchase, it's binding, but it is on both ends. So you have to make sure that you're also holding up your end of the bargain. Now, as a seller, it's your responsibility to also be honest. Now, we are going to kind of disregard the people that aren't honest, the people that are trying to scam people, because this isn't for them. This is for people that are actually trying to run a proper business. I think MorphMarket's default policy says that the snake will be within 80% of the listed weight. So if you're listing a snake for 500 grams, it shouldn't be any less than 400 grams. It could have had a real big poop before you went to go ship it, so it might not be 500 grams exactly. But if you're listing a snake and you have it listed as 500 grams and it's been listed for 9 months and you haven't updated the weight, and now this snake is, still 500 grams, or it's 800 grams, or for some reason it's 400 grams, you're probably going to have an issue. So in your listings, I highly recommend to update it as frequently as possible. Usually if I have snakes that are listed that haven't sold a month or two, I usually update their weight, usually every 30 to 60 days, so that people have an idea of what the snake's actual size is. And I usually write in the description that, hey, this snake was the weight was last updated on 1/25/23, just so they know when the weight was updated. It's also up to the buyer to ask any questions before making the purchase, because once they make the purchase, technically you've made the agreement, you guys are in a contract. At this point, the person's already purchased it, especially if you ship the animal. If they receive this animal and just decide, hey, I don't want it, well, that's up to you as a seller whether or not you want to take a return on that animal. Most sellers, I believe, do not return animals, just if it's like a buyer's remorse sort of thing. I don't know, because again, going back to what I said earlier, you have no idea what sort of condition the buyer has in their collection, in their house probably. So you're taking a giant risk shipping a snake to somebody and then them just throwing a hissy fit for no reason, unless it's an issue with the seller. But if it's just a buyer being ridiculous, you're taking a big risk bringing that back into your collection, even if you need to quarantine it, because you have no idea what sort of health issues there are in the buyer's collection itself. Also, you need to accurately represent your snake's genetics in your store policy. There are the incomplete dominant genes and there are the recessive genes. The incomplete dominant genes are the ones that are visible whether they're in single gene form or super form, like Enchi, for example. You have an Enchi, it's visible with one copy of the gene, and you have a super Enchi, and it's visible with 2 copies of the gene. Whereas a clown or a pied, those being recessive genes, they're only visible if you have 2 copies of the gene. People that are selling het clown, het pied, it means they only have 1 copy of the gene. The only genetics that I recommend that you guarantee are het recessive genes. So if you bred a pied to a clown, none of the offspring would be visuals. They would be 100% het clown, 100% het pied. You should be able to guarantee those genes to your client because you bred those snakes, you know what the parents were, you know what the outcome was, and you can guarantee that those are what the genes are. On the flip side, with your incomplete dominant genes, or if you want to call them co-dom genes, most breeders do not guarantee those genes because there is a very high complexity to IDing those animals. When you start getting 3, 4, 5, 6 co-dominant genes into one snake, IDing them can be very difficult. And a lot of breeders have a theoretical ID kind of laid out in their store policies, meaning that, look, I tried my best to ID this animal. I have spent as much time as I needed to ID this animal properly, and this is my theoretical ID for the co-dominant or incomplete dominant genes in the snake. I am not responsible if it turns out that the snake doesn't have all of the genes listed, or if the snake has more genes than I listed. One way, the customer's going to be happy, one way the customer's probably going to be upset, but it's also the customer's responsibility to do their own research to see if they agree with the genetics of this animal, the codoms. And if they have any questions about that, they should ask them before purchasing to make sure they know what they're getting into and to see if maybe they agree with the lineage or they don't agree with the lineage. And at that point, it's up to the customer to decide whether or not they want to purchase that snake. The only time genetics should be an issue is when you're talking about the heterozygous recessive genes, when they're not visible, when you can't tell if they're there or not. As a seller, you need to make sure that you're listing those snakes honestly and you know exactly what the genetics are. If they're co-dominant genes and they're visible, it's up to you to try to honestly ID the snake with your theoretical ID, but this is all up in the customer's business in terms of making sure that they're agreeing with the ID before they make the purchase. I'm going to skim here through my store policy to kind of let you know the different things that I've customized to kind of make it better fit what I thought was necessary to kind of protect myself as a seller. I state which forms of payment I take. I state how much of a deposit I will accept from a snake. I also say how long typically people have for their payment plans. This is an issue that I've run into a couple times where people put a deposit on a snake and they actually never pay for the snake by the time their deposit or the rest of the balance is due. So I have that outlined as well. I have it outlined what happens to their deposit money if they choose not to pay the snake off. I have that outlined because that's very important too, because then you're going to get into an argument of, well, I paid you a deposit, but I didn't buy the snake, so what do you do with that money? That needs to be outlined as well. I outline that just because you say you want to buy a snake, that doesn't mean I'm giving you the snake. You have to pay me for it first. So I kind of have a little thing here that says first come, first serve is who gets the snake, not somebody who calls dibs on it. There's a lot of guys out there that call dibs but never actually follow through with it. So don't promise your snake to somebody unless they give you the money. I say that I guarantee the animals to be healthy, correctly sexed, accurately represented, and feeding, unless stated otherwise. I've never actually sold a hatchling that wasn't eating properly, but if I've had older snakes that I can say, hey, this has been a picky eater, just buyer beware, I have done that. I actually purchased a lavender albino het pied female, I think, last year. She ate for me for a couple weeks and then went off food, and there was a couple months that went by she didn't eat for me anymore, and I decided to kind of cut bait on it, and I relisted her, and I just said, hey, look, she's here. This is basically the same price I paid for her. She gained a little bit of weight from when I bought her, just to let you know she's a picky eater. So that's important to mention as well. I mentioned that I only ship to hubs for pickup. I mentioned what days that I will ship. I only ship out Tuesdays or Wednesdays for Wednesday or Thursday delivery because Ship Your Reptiles says not to ship the other days, and I try to stick by, MorphMarket, Ship Your Reptiles, Reptiles Express, all these companies, they're trying to protect you and the buyer. So when they give out guidelines like don't ship on Mondays and don't ship on Fridays, listen to them because they're trying to make sure that your snakes get there alive and you're not getting into a battle with each other between buyers and sellers because the snake arrived dead. Just listen to their policies and stick to them. I have, the live arrival is guaranteed or reimbursed in the form of store credit, and it's only applicable to animals shipped to a FedEx hub. Let's see. Any DOA claims must be accompanied by video proof. You can't get a snake and have it for 2 days and then say, hey, it's dead. I say that you need to make sure that as you're unboxing the snake, you're taking a video of it, and if it's dead, it's dead. I need to have proof of it. It can't just be dead 2 days later. I believe Ship Your Reptiles is the only company that every once in a while offers shipping insurance. I have that if a customer wants to purchase shipping insurance, it's out of their pocket, not out of mine, and it's completely optional if they decide to purchase it. So those are some of the things that I added and customized into my policy. Go ahead and take a look at it again. I'll put a link below to that. But you need to customize this stuff so it protects you. MorphMarket's default policy is a good kind of baseline, but I think for your own benefit, you're going to want to customize that. Like I said, go ahead and copy mine, copy bits and pieces from other breeders. I don't think anybody's going to care that you're taking some of their policy and making it your own. The whole goal of all of this is to, be honest as a breeder, be upfront with your customers, and make sure that there's no discrepancies between, what you're selling and what the customer thinks they're buying. Now, in the next video, I'm going to go over what your kind of rights are as a buyer, but I'm also going to kind of talk about where the buyer needs to be responsible for the money they're spending in the snakes they're purchasing. So thank you for stopping by and watching this video. This is it's a difficult topic, but it's something you definitely need to pay attention to and really take action on before you even decide to start listing snakes, to protect yourself and make sure your business stays healthy and that you don't have any confusion between you and your buyers. So thank you guys for stopping by, and we'll see you in the next video.